Welcome back to the Sound for More channel. Today we continue the journey in learning how to use the Obsidian Synth inside NanoStudio 2. Before I continue, I would like to remind my viewers to subscribe as it helps with growing the channel. Additionally, if you would like to support what I do, please do make sure to follow the instruction contained in each video description. Thank you again. So we are inside the NanoStudio 2 and we can create a new project, or I have just created I've just loaded actually a previous one which I have created a long time ago. Now if I click here to the view of the tracks, I have a number of tracks. It doesn't really matter which one I select, but make sure you do click on one where it says Obsidian. Of course, you can create a new track as well with and select Obsidian as your instrument. Now, as you come in, let's go to patch here. Then let's go on the top right side and burger menu and select init to initialize the patch. Nice and simple. Let's click edit here and we are on the oscillator view. Now, and you can see 3 oscillator. The first one is active. You see the red here. Number 2 is not active. Number 3 is not active. So we have only oscillator number 1 active, which is great. Now, where it says type, we select sample. Now, if you play some key, you don't hear anything because there is no sample loaded. So click here where it says load sample. And then here is where you, inside the library, where you can load previously imported samples. Of course, you can go on the 3 dot here and import a new one. You can create folders, rename, copy, move, export, edit, etc., etc. So let's load something like this piano note, so double click on it. Now, as you can see here, we have the representation of your keyboard here with the full range, and we have a piano sample which covers the entire zone or entire keys. So now if I press some keys in the external controller, it will actually play that sample. Now, if you want to see the sample, click here where it says zone, and then click here where it says edit, and that is where you see the sample editor, which is really, really good. You can do a lot on this. I will do a full tutorial. But for now, click on volume and then select normalize. Okay, now let's click on the exit to leave. Let's say save as, and let's give it a new name. It doesn't really matter. I'll select test. I used it before, so it will ask me to overwrite. Okay, so let's play. So now the volume is higher because we have normalized that waveform. Of course, I could have chosen also to record something using, for example, the microphone of the iPad in this case, or an audio interface, depending on what you have actually connected. Right. Now, if I try to, actually, before I go into it, let's go into edit sample again, and let's remove a little bit. Click and hold here. Let's remove this part here because there's a long silence here at the end of this waveform. So click and hold, you highlight these, then select delete, and we have a waveform which is shorter. Click on the exit again, click on save, which will overwrite the test.wave. Now, if you click on parameter, at the moment it says loop here. Okay, so if I click a note and I hold it, it will repeat itself in a loop. Now, if I go to the left here, I can disable the loop. So when I played it, it will not play in a loop. Okay, and then if I click right, I have a loop sustain, which can be a loop which can be sustained using the entire waveform or just the sustain looping, which is defined on the waveform, and using a spectral algorithm to do that. I'll show you the differences in a moment, but just to give you an example. And at the moment, if I use just the sustain loop region defined in the sample, it will be the same because it's not been defined. But it's really interesting because it loops on either the entire waveform or a sustain loop form. Part or region of your sample. So that's quite good. And then it creates that spectral analysis, through a spectral algorithm, you create that part of sound which is repeated regularly to keep the sustain up. One instead, if you don't have that, you have a normal loop, it will play the sample and then loop over it. One instead, this one, spectral, either for the entire waveform or the sustain region only. And I'll come back to the difference in a moment. Now, if you are in loop or no loop mode, you can change the direction here. The moment is forward, but you can also have it reversed. Or forward and then reverse. And because it's in a loop, we will continue to do that. Reverse, forward, or you can do the opposite, backward first and then forward. So it really depends what you like. You can adjust it in terms of cents. You can go really high to 50 cents, depending really what you want to do. So it's a micro tuning, so that works really well. Or of course you can go negative as well. You can adjust also the level as well. And when available, of course, the pan. Now, the key here shows you the range. At the moment, the root is C3, which is good to actually being able to change that if you need to, based on how the sample was recorded. And then you can define the minimal here, which is C-2 here, and the maximum G8, which is up here. Okay. Now, if we go to zone, you can load another sample, you can go into the sample editor, you can record, or you can try to add another zone. But in this case, it will say reduce its key range to create space for a new zone. So how do we do that? We go to key, and here where it says minimum C2, we click learn, and then we press C3. There you go. And he has created a division here. So we have this sample here from C3 to G8. This gives me the ability then go back to zone, click on add, and we have created another zone there. And now inside that, I could load, for example, a red strike note, double click. And I can adjust the volume independently for each one of them. So 2 samples, 2 regions, 2 key zones, really great. And you can adjust individually tones, tuning, direction, looping, etc., etc. So, and then of course I can go back here, edit this sample. I could go to volume, normalize it, and then save. Let's save these as why not test 2. Test 2, which I already used here. So it's high as a volume now. And of course, what really changes is the root here, that you will find that changing the root, of course, you adjusting the position of the sample for key tracking purposes, okay? Now, if you click here on the spanner, you can remove everything, set your sample loop, which I'm going to explain in a moment, set your play direction, the key minimal max for the root, close the gaps in the key range, or add some crossfade, which you can do by 1 semitone, 2 semitones, 3 semitones. Let's do 2 semitones. Now, if I press the C3, there's an overlapping of the 2 samples. B2, overlapping. B flat 2, no overlapping. Okay? And there is no overlapping there. So 1, 2. We have those 2 semitones which are overlapping. Of course, you can click here, set key crossfade none, and you remove it. There is no crossfading anymore between these 2. Now, remember, when you're editing the sample, you can, for example, as well create fade in, fade out if you need to as well. So that is really useful. But now, let's do something different, okay? Let's click remove here and remove again, so we remove everything. Now let's load a sample, which is a much longer sample, better days here. Okay, so this is a very long sample.
So sometimes I catch myself thinking, why do I feel so late?
Okay, so if I go now on looping using the entire waveform from a spectral algorithm point of view, let's press a note. Okay, let's go to zone now and go to the sample editor. Let's select a small area there. Let's go to action here, and let's say we set the sustain loop to be that bit. Exit. Let's save it again as a test for now. We rewrite, we use that multiple times. Now, let's go back to parameter here. We have the spectral algorithm using the entire waveform at the moment. Only the sustain loop. Very different. And depending on which sustain loop region you define through the sample editor, you can obtain very different option. Of course, you can go back here, click action and clear the sustain loop, okay, and then save it, right? In that case, now it has disappeared. You see that here is the sound exactly the same. Now let's go to the patch editor here. Let's click sample here to ensure we have a sample. Let's scroll this part here. Let's see if we can find perhaps this one bass contract. Let's go to edit here. Okay, let's click on one of the sample here. Let's go to the looping here using the spectral algorithm for the entire waveform, all. Sustain. Very different, right? Again, that is another example, you know, in terms of hearing the differences. So depending on how you set that looping sustain region, then you can use these two types of parameters for looping for the entire waveform or just the sustain loop region. Okay, so yeah, and this is a bit of an introduction of how you can use the sample type of oscillator. So Obsidian is really powerful as a synth, and yeah, I really recommend it. I hope you enjoyed the introduction to sample mode, and as always, see you next time. Bye.